back this weekend. So now it's time for our college football and NFL predictions for this weekend. Let's get right on into it. First game will be on Friday night, September the 8th, as Oklahoma State goes into Mobile, Alabama to take on the South Alabama. And I will be taking Oklahoma State and Mason Rudolph to get another win. They started off a little bit slow last week, but I think Oklahoma State will find a way to get the win here.
Are they playing Alabama or South Alabama?
They will be playing South Alabama this weekend.
Well, in that case, I'm taking Oklahoma State.
Next game up, Lane Kiffin, and his first road game as FAU head coach.
Ooh.
And they will be heading into Madison, Wisconsin to take on the Wisconsin Badgers. And I'll be taking Wisconsin in this game. I think Wisconsin's got a better defense, and I think that Wisconsin will find a way to walk out of Madison with the win.
I hope Wisconsin wins big. I expect them to win big. They'll win by 3 touchdowns. Lane Kiffin's going to go home and be quite sad after this game. Wisconsin Badgers.
Next up, the Cincinnati Bearcats, coming out of the American Athletic Conference, will be heading into Ann Arbor, Michigan to take on the Michigan Wolverines in their home opener. After what I saw last week from Michigan, I wasn't that impressed, but I think Michigan finds a way to get the win here against Cincinnati.
Cincinnati's an awfully good team out of the AAC, but I think Michigan's just better. They're better coached. They have better athletes. Michigan wins this by 2 touchdowns.
Next up, the Louisville Cardinal heading in to Chapel Hill to take on the North Carolina Tar Heels. Louisville looked a little bit shaky last week, but I think that Lamar Jackson will get them ready this week, and Louisville looks a little bit better this week and get the win.
I think Louisville moved the ball fine. They looked impressive in terms of their yardage. They turned the ball over quite a bit. I think they'll cut down the turnovers, and they'll go into North Carolina and win by 10 points against North Carolina.
Next up, South Florida, who has not been as good as people said they've been coming into the season. And they will head into East Hartford, Connecticut to take on the UConn Huskies. And I think this is the week where USF proves to people that they are the team to be reckoned with in the AAC. I like USF to win by at least 2 touchdowns.
I am picking an upset here. I'm going with the UConn Huskies. I think USF has played poorly the first 2 weeks. They've got away with it, playing 2 weak teams. I think UConn's going to win this game.
Next up, the Charlotte 49ers will be heading into Manhattan, Kansas to take on the Kansas State Wildcats. And I'll be taking Kansas State nice and easy this week against Charlotte. K-State gets the win easy.
Charlotte?
Yes.
They have a college team?
Yes.
This is not the pro team?
Nope.
All right, well, the Kansas State's going to win big. Bill Snyder, who's going to turn 95, I think, this week. I like their chances.
Next up, East Carolina, after getting upset, which we called last week. And they will be heading into Morgantown, West Virginia to take on the West Virginia Mountaineers, who had a 1st and goal last night and they got stopped 3 times against Virginia Tech. And I think that will give them some motivation this week. West Virginia gets back on track this week and gets the win.
My boy Will Greer from Florida Gators will lead West Virginia to a big win in this game.
Next up, Fresno State heading into Tuscaloosa to take on the number 1 ranked Alabama Crimson Tide. 2 linebackers for Alabama will be out for the season, but I don't think it'll hurt them here. Alabama gets the win by at least 3 touchdowns.
Alabama rolls. Roll Tide.
Next up, Pittsburgh heading into University Park to take on Penn State. And Trace McSorley looked very impressive last week. So did that running back for Penn State. So I'll take Penn State and that in the best backfield in college football to get the win over Pitt.
I agree. I think Penn State's going to win this as well. I think Penn State used to be a close rivalry, but I think Penn State wins big in this one.
Next up, Miami going in to Jonesboro, Arkansas to take on Arkansas State. And I'll be taking Miami to get the win just because I want Arkansas State to lose after what they did to UCF last year in the bowl game.
That's right. Arkansas State did beat UCF, didn't they?
Yes.
For that reason, I'm going to pick Arkansas State. I think they're going to upset Miami in Arkansas State.
Next up, the Delaware Blue Hens will be heading in to Blacksburg, Virginia to take on the Virginia Tech Hokies. And Josh Jackson looked very impressive yesterday. I'll take Virginia Tech to get the win over Delaware.
Battle of the Birds, the Blue Hens versus the Hokies. The Hokies are a tougher bird than the Blue Hen. I like the Hokies.
Next up, San Jose State coming in at 1-1 will be heading in to Austin, Texas to take on Tom Herman and his Texas Longhorns after getting upset last week against Maryland. I think Texas is going to bounce back and get the win over San Jose State.
Herman and his boys are going to play angry. The Longhorns are going to win this by at least 10 points.
Next up, Indiana State heading into Knoxville, Tennessee to take on the Tennessee Volunteers, and I'll be taking Tennessee to win this game. I haven't seen the team play yet. We'll find out how they look tonight, but I think Tennessee gets the win on Saturday against Indiana State.
I agree. Indiana State was good in 1879 with their basketball team, but they haven't been good since. They lose big to Tennessee.
Next up, Louisiana Monroe heading into Tallahassee to take on Florida State without their starting quarterback, DeAndre Francois. I think that'll be make this game a little bit closer, but I see Florida State winning by 2 touchdowns.
No Francois, Florida State still wins by at least 3 touchdowns.
Next up, one of the big games of the weekend as the Auburn Tigers and Gus Malzahn head in to Clemson, South Carolina to take on Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers. I was very impressed with how Clemson looked last week, so I will take Clemson to get the win over Auburn.
Dabo Swinney, best first name in college coaching. Dabo. Think about that. Dabo. Clemson wins big. Clemson's just too good.
Next up, number 7 Oklahoma heading into Columbus, Ohio to take on the number 2 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. Baker Mayfield looked very impressive last week, but I think he'll struggle a little bit this week. Ohio State pulls off the narrow win over Oklahoma.
I think Ohio State's going to bounce back after a mediocre performance against Indiana. I think Ohio State actually is going to win pretty big by 17 or more against the Oklahoma Sooners.
Next up, Chattanooga heading into Baton Rouge, Louisiana to take on the LSU Tigers. And Darius Geis looked very impressive like I told you he would last week. So Darius Geis and LSU get the win over Chattanooga this weekend.
Chattanooga has a college?
Yep.
That's all you need to know. LSU wins big.
Next up, number 15 ranked Georgia heading into Notre Dame, Indiana to take on the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. No Jacob Eason this weekend for Georgia. So with that, I will take Notre Dame to pull off the upset over Georgia. With no quarterback for Georgia, I will take Notre Dame.
I think Notre Dame is overrated as they usually are. I think Georgia, even without their starting quarterback, will go in and win at Notre Dame.
Next up, Northern Colorado heading into Gainesville to take on Felipe Franks and the Florida Gators. I was very impressed with how he looked last week against Michigan. So I will take Florida to get the win by at least 3 touchdowns.
I don't know if Florida can score 3 touchdowns unless their defense scores 2 of them. With that, I still think to beat Northern Colorado by 3 points.
Next up, Montana heading in to Seattle, Washington to take on Jake Browning and his Washington Huskies. I'll be taking Jake Browning and Washington, one of my Heisman sleepers this year to win the Heisman, Jake Browning. He looked very impressive last week. I think Washington gets the win over Montana.
I agree. Washington Huskies have too much for Montana.
Next up, number 14 Stanford heading into LA to take on the number 4 ranked USC Trojans. I'll be taking USC and Sam Darnold to bounce back after a struggle last week against Western Michigan. I think USC bounces back and gets a nice, easy win this week over Stanford.
I think USC was exposed last week. I think Stanford goes in and beats them, surprises USC, and wins by 7.
Next up, Boise State heading into Pullman, Washington to take on the Washington State Cougars. I think Wazoo will find a way to walk out of this game with a win over Boise State. Washington State gets the win over Boise.
So they're not playing the blue turf?
They are not.
I like Washington State in this one then. Washington State by 10.
And for the non-top 25 game of the week, UCF will be hosting Memphis on Saturday night. If that game gets in, I don't know because of Hurricane Irma, but I think UCF will find a way to walk out of that game with a win. Mackenzie Milton looked very impressive last week. 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 300 yards. The AAC player of the week last week. UCF and Scott Frost start off 2-0.
This is going to be a very close game. Memphis has built up a good program, but I think at home, I think UCF is rolling. I think UCF will win in a very close one. UCF wins this one.
And now for the NFL predictions for this week. Finally, the NFL is back this weekend, and I am very excited. So let's start off with the games. First up, the Kansas City Chiefs will be heading into Gillette Stadium and Foxborough to take on the defending Super Bowl champion New England Patriots. I think Tom Brady's going to throw for at least 3 or 4 touchdowns this week as the Patriots beat the Chiefs by 3 touchdowns.
I think the game will be closer than that, but I do agree the Patriots will win. I think they'll win by 10 against the Chiefs at home.
Next up, the New York Jets heading into Buffalo to take on the Bills. Tyrod Taylor got a concussion earlier on in the week, so we don't know if he'll be ready. But I think either way, the Bills win a close one against the Jets. I see the Bills winning 14-10.
This is a game for who's the worst team in New York, which is not saying a lot. I'm going to actually go with Buffalo on this one, but I think it's going to be a close game.
I do too. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons heading into Soldier Field to take on the Chicago Bears. Mike Glennon is projected to be a starter in that game, so I will take Matt Ryan and the Falcons to get a nice, easy win against the Bears to start off the season.
I think on the road, this will be a closer game than most people think, but I agree. I think the Falcons will win this one by 3.
Next up, the Baltimore Ravens heading into Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. Joe Flacco could be back this week, but I think Andy Dalton and A.J. Green and Joe Mixon are going to be too much for the Ravens to handle. I'll take the Bengals to get the win over the Ravens.
I think this is going to be Joe Mixon's breakout performance. He's going to be the Ezekiel Elliott of this season. I think Mixon leads the Cincinnati Bengals to a big win.
Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into First Energy Stadium to take on the Cleveland Browns. I'll be taking the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is my easy pick of the week. The Steelers get a nice, easy win against the Browns to start the season.
Not so fast. I'm picking a huge upset here. I'm going on a limb. I think the Cleveland Browns are much improved. I think they will surprise Pittsburgh and win this one by 1 point.
Next up, the Arizona Cardinals, who I was let down by last year. They were my Super Bowl prediction coming out of the NFC last year. They will head into Ford Field to take on Matthew Stafford and the Lions. I think Carson Palmer's going to have a bounce back year. David Johnson's going to run all over that defense. Arizona gets the win.
I think if Arizona was at home, they win this game. But I think at Detroit, Stafford with that big contract, I think Detroit wins this one in a close one.
Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars will head into Houston to take on the Texans. And I think that Deshaun Watson is going to have a huge day, and the Texans win by at least 3 touchdowns.
As much as I'd like to pick the Jaguars, I got to pick the Texans in this one. I think they win by at least 10 points.
Next up, if this game goes, it will be at Sunday at 1 o'clock. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading in to Hard Rock Stadium to take on Jay Cutler and the Miami Dolphins. I will be taking Tampa Bay to get the win here, just because of the quarterback battle here. Jameis Winston is a far better quarterback than Jay Cutler, so I'll take Tampa Bay to get the win by a field goal.
As much as I want to pick Tampa Bay, I want to go with my head. I think the Dolphins at home will be too much for the Bucs. They win by field goal.
Next up, the mighty Oakland Raiders will head into Nashville, Tennessee and Nissan Stadium to take on Marcus Mariota and the Titans. This is probably going to be one of the best games of the weekend, but I think Derek Carr, with all those weapons that he has now, and Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree, Marshawn Lynch, I think the Raiders get the win here over the Titans.
I think usually teams that travel west and they go to east struggle. I think the Raiders' defense is suspect, and I think the Titans are much improved. I like the Titans in this one to win by a field goal.
Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles heading into FedEx Field in Landover, Maryland to take on the Washington Redskins. I will be taking Carson Wentz and that new receiver in Alshon Jeffrey. Doug Peterson starts 1-0 for the second straight year. The Eagles get the win in Washington.
I agree with Scott on this one. I think the Redskins lost too many weapons on the outside, and I believe the Philadelphia Eagles will win this one.
Next up, the Indianapolis Colts heading into Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum to take on the Los Angeles Rams. No Andrew Luck for week 1. Scott Tolzien will be the starting quarterback. So with that, I'll be taking the Rams to get the home win over the Colts. If that was Andrew Luck, I would be taking the Colts, but give me the Rams.
No luck, no win. Rams win.
Next up, the Seattle Seahawks will be heading into Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers. I'll be taking the Seattle Seahawks to get the win here.
Wow. I actually will take the Packers here. I think the Packers are going to start out 1-0.
I'm actually going to change. I agree. Packers get the win. Aaron Rodgers is too much. Packers win. Next up, the Carolina Panthers heading in to Levi Stadium and Santa Clara